Imagine dying and coming back with a message so terrifying, so unbelievable, that no one will believe you until it starts coming true. That's exactly what happened to Noah, a 12-year-old boy from a quiet suburban town. His life was normal: school, video games, hanging out with friends, until one fateful afternoon when everything changed forever. Noah was riding his bike home from school, just like any other day. He had taken the same route 100 times before. The sun was shining, the wind was cool, and the world felt ordinary, safe. But what he didn't know was that he was about to cross an invisible line, a moment in time that would split his life into a before and an after. He didn't hear the truck. The driver never saw him. 1 second, Noah was gliding down the sidewalk, his thoughts drifting from homework to what he'd eat for dinner. The next, impact. Witnesses would later describe it as something out of a nightmare. The sound of metal against bone, the way his small body crumpled under the weight of the vehicle before being thrown several feet. His bike lay twisted on the pavement. His backpack had exploded, papers fluttering in the wind. And Noah, motionless. Paramedics arrived within minutes. His heart had stopped, no pulse, no breath. They did everything they could, desperately trying to bring him back. But Noah was already gone. And yet, Noah wasn't gone at all. As his lifeless body lay on the street, Noah's consciousness drifted away. He didn't feel pain. He didn't feel fear. He simply felt himself, detaching, floating. The chaos below him, his own body, the screaming voices, the flashing lights, felt distant, almost unreal. He tried to call out, but no one could hear him. He tried to move, but he had no form, no hands, no body at all. He was weightless, pulled upward by something unseen. Then, in an instant, the world around him disappeared. Everything became dark. Not the kind of darkness that comes with night or closing your eyes. This was different. A void, an emptiness that stretched forever. It was neither warm nor cold. It was silent, but not peaceful. And in that silence, Noah felt something he had never felt before in his life. Something was there, watching him. Then a voice. It wasn't loud, it wasn't soft. It was simply everywhere, surrounding him, inside him. It didn't speak in words, not exactly, but in meaning, pure, undeniable truth that entered his mind like fire. You must return. Noah couldn't see who was speaking, but he felt its presence. And that presence was overwhelming, powerful beyond comprehension, a force that could shatter mountains, bend time, erase entire galaxies with a thought. But instead of fear, Noah felt something else. Love. A love so intense, so pure, that it made the love of a mother for her child seem like a flickering candle next to the sun. He knew without being told who was standing before him. Jesus. But not as he had ever imagined him. Not as a painting, not as a story from Sunday school. This was different. His eyes burned like fire, not in anger, but in divine purpose. His voice carried the weight of eternity itself. He was not just a man, he was something far beyond that. And then the vision began. Noah saw things, flashes of events, faces he didn't recognize, places he had never been. It was like being thrown into the future, witnessing pieces of a puzzle that hadn't yet been put together. One image stood out. A young man, tall and silent with piercing blue eyes and golden hair. He stood behind someone, a leader, a man of power, a man the world knew. But this young man wasn't just an observer. He was guiding something, moving the pieces, shaping what was to come. And then, for the first time, Noah heard Jesus speak again. "Barren will lead the way. Watch for the signs." The words seared into his mind, branding themselves into his soul like a message meant not just for him, but for the world. Then, silence. The vision ended. The darkness was gone. The presence faded, and Noah was falling. Falling back into his body, back into pain, back into the screams and the flashing lights. Back to life. Noah's eyes shot open. A gasp of air filled his lungs, so sudden and violent that his entire body convulsed. The paramedics, who had been moments away from declaring him dead, staggered back in shock. One of them nearly dropped the defibrillator paddles. "He's back," one of them stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. The others didn't respond at first. They were frozen, staring at the boy who had just been dead for 3 whole minutes. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. No heartbeat, no breathing, no signs of life. And then, just like that, Noah had returned. But Noah wasn't the same. At first, all he could do was stare, his chest rising and falling in frantic, shallow breaths. The world around him, the flashing lights, the chaotic voices, felt wrong. Like a dream he had woken up from too soon. He tried to speak, but his voice failed him. There were too many thoughts, too many images flashing through his mind. The fire in those eyes, the weight of the voice, the boy with the golden hair, and that name, that one name, Baron. The doctors didn't understand. They called it trauma, a reaction to the accident, a side effect of oxygen deprivation. But Noah knew better. He had been somewhere else. He had seen something else. The days that followed were a blur of hospital rooms, whispered conversations, and sleepless nights. His parents were relieved, overwhelmed with gratitude that their son had survived, but Noah could barely hear them. His mind was consumed by one thought. What had he seen? And why had Jesus told him that name? For weeks he said nothing, not because he didn't want to, but because he didn't know how to. How do you tell people you saw something beyond life itself? How do you explain that the most powerful being in existence had given you a message about a boy you had never met? So Noah did the only thing he could do. He searched. At first, the name didn't bring up anything unusual. Just ordinary people, doctors, lawyers, athletes. None of them felt right. None of them matched the vision. And then, one day, he found him. It was a news broadcast. Something about a political rally. Noah wasn't paying attention to the speaker. His eyes were locked on the boy standing in the background. Tall, silent, golden hair, piercing blue eyes. It was him. Baron Trump. The name burned in Noah's mind like a brand. His hands trembled as he clicked on article after article, searching for anything, any connection to what he had seen. And the deeper he went, the more unsettling it became. It wasn't just that Baron Trump was the son of a president. That wasn't enough. It was something else. The way he was always watching, always standing just behind his father, barely speaking, barely noticed. It was as if he wasn't meant to be seen, only to observe. And then there were the rumors, the theories, the strange coincidences buried deep in forgotten corners of the internet. Old books from the 1800s mentioning a Baron Trump and time travel. Cryptic discussions about a role he was destined to play. And suddenly, Noah realized the truth. Jesus hadn't just told him Baron's name. He had shown him his role. The future had already been written. Baron wasn't just another figure in the background. He was the key. But to what? Noah was afraid to say it out loud. Afraid that if he spoke it into existence, it would become too real. Baron wasn't just watching history unfold. He was shaping it. Noah kept digging, searching for anything that could explain why Jesus had chosen him to see this. And then, he found something else. Something buried so deep that even those who followed politics never noticed it. It wasn't just who Baron was. It was what he was doing. Quietly, behind the scenes. While the world focused on the usual campaign strategies, Barron was whispering something else into his father's ear. Not about policies, not about debates, about where to go, who to talk to, not the mainstream media, not the usual interviews, but places no one expected, podcasts, online platforms, people who had been ignored for years but had the power to reach an entire generation. And suddenly, everything made sense. Donald Trump hadn't just won because of rallies or debates. He had won because he had been given a map. And that map had been designed by his own son. Noah's heart pounded in his chest. Barron wasn't just a spectator. He was the architect of something much bigger. And if the vision had been real, if Jesus had truly spoken his name, then this was only the beginning. Noah couldn't shake the feeling that he had uncovered something he wasn't meant to know. His hands trembled as he scrolled through the endless stream of information, his eyes scanning every word, every detail. He wasn't just looking at articles or news clips anymore. He was looking at history before it happened. Everything he had seen in his vision, the whispers, the influence, the strategy, was real. Barron Trump wasn't just standing silently in the background for no reason. He was positioning himself where no one would think to look. And the world had missed it. Barron had never needed the spotlight. He didn't crave attention the way others did. While the media obsessed over every speech, every rally, every scandal, Barron was studying, calculating, learning how people thought, how they moved, what they believed in. He wasn't guiding his father in the traditional sense. He wasn't telling him what to say or do. He was showing him where to go. Noah found himself staring at a map, tracing a pattern that no one else had seen. Podcasts, independent voices, online communities that no politician had ever dared to touch. These weren't just interviews. These were gateways. Barron had pushed his father into a new battlefield, one where the old rules didn't apply. The mainstream media no longer held the power. It was the internet, the underground conversations, the voices that resonated with those who had grown tired of being ignored. The shift had been so subtle that even the experts had missed it. But Noah hadn't, because he had seen it before it even happened. And that's when the fear set in. If Jesus had shown him this, if Barron truly was the architect of something far greater than anyone realized, then what else was coming? Noah stayed awake for nights on end, digging deeper, trying to piece together the puzzle that had been placed before him. Every time he thought he understood, something new would surface. He wasn't the only one who had noticed Barron's strange presence in history. There were whispers, hidden in the darkest corners of the internet. People who believed there was something different about him, not just because of his family name, not just because of his silence, but because of what was coming next. Noah's stomach twisted as he read the theories, the speculations. Some people believed Barron was a time traveler. Others believed he was a prophet, sent to shape the course of human history. But the most terrifying theory? The one that Noah couldn't ignore? That Barron had already seen the future, that he wasn't just advising his father out of instinct, but because he knew exactly what was going to happen, that he had always known. It was impossible. It was insane. And yet, Noah couldn't deny what he had seen, what he had been told. Barron will lead the way. The words echoed in his mind like a prophecy, a warning. And for the first time, Noah realized the truth. This wasn't just about an election. It wasn't just about winning. This was about something bigger, something that no one saw coming. And Barron? He wasn't just preparing for it. He was creating it. Noah sat in the dim glow of his computer screen, his pulse pounding in his ears. He had spent weeks, months, trying to understand what had happened to him. The vision, the name, the message. It had all led him here, to this moment. Everything in his soul told him that this wasn't just some strange coincidence. This wasn't just some eerie realization about Baron Trump's role in the election. This was bigger. And then, as if the puzzle pieces had finally clicked into place, Noah understood. Baron wasn't just someone guiding his father behind the scenes. He wasn't just helping him win an election. He was playing a role that had been set in motion long before any of them were even born. Noah thought back to that presence, the overwhelming power that had stood before him in the void. Jesus hadn't just given him a message. He had given him a glimpse of the future. A future that wasn't just about politics. It was about survival. About the fate of an entire generation. Because what Baron had done, what he was still doing, wasn't just about getting his father back in power. It was about what came next. Noah looked back at his notes, his research, the movements of power, the subtle shifts in influence that no one had noticed until it was too late. Baron had seen something the rest of the world had been blind to. A war was coming. Not a war of nations. Not a war fought with weapons, but a war of ideas, of control, of truth itself. For too long, the powerful had dictated reality. They decided what people could say, what they could think, what they could believe. They controlled the narratives, shaping history not as it was, but as they wanted it to be. And Baron had broken that system. While the world had laughed at him, while they called him a quiet, awkward boy, standing in the background, he had been moving the chess pieces into place. Noah suddenly felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. What if Baron had known about this all along? What if he had been preparing for something bigger than just his father's return to power? The election victory was just the first step, and Noah could feel it in his bones. The real battle was still ahead. Because if Baron had truly been guiding his father, if he had led him to the right voices, the right people, the right platforms, then it meant that he had already seen what was coming. And that thought terrified Noah more than anything else. His mind spun back to the vision, to the way Jesus had spoken. Watch for the signs. At the time, he hadn't understood, but now it was becoming clearer. Baron wasn't just going to fade into the background. He was stepping forward, slowly, carefully, but deliberately, and the world had no idea. Noah closed his laptop, his hands shaking. He had never believed in fate. He had never thought that one person could change everything. But then he remembered those eyes, the eyes of fire, the voice that had echoed through the void, and the name that had been burned into his soul, Baron Trump. Noah finally understood. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning.